In the last 12 months, 29,000 renters were evicted from their homes. Yes, you heard that right, 29,000. You might assume these people wanted to move out or leave, but no, they were literally kicked out from where they lived. And it was so bad that they weren't able to do anything about it. But it's not even the worst part. At first glance, it's easy to believe these people were not paying their rent or had some other valid reasons. But you would be wrong. Over 12,000 people were kicked out because their landlord wanted it that way. Yes, 12,000. These people were known as good tenants, but yet they left their house because the landlords wanted it that way. And I don't even want to talk about rent prices, because in the UK, the average renter spends 39% of their income on rent alone. With bills and other expenses, this rises to 45%. I know this seems unbelievable, but I want to repeat it one more time. 45%. For one person, this means that to live in an average home in the UK for a year, you need to spend 6 months working just to pay rent. Yes, only rent. And each year the affordability threshold gets worse because while rents go up, salaries can't catch up. And because of this, 37% of private renters in the UK are living in poverty once housing costs are taken into account. That means around 4,800,000 renters are in poverty after paying rent. This shows how bad the rental sector has become in just 2 decades, because to live under a roof, you need to pay. And when you pay, you are in poverty. It seems like a joke, but it's not. And each year, statistics show that it's getting worse than the year before, because in the last 10 years, the rent prices have doubled. But the salaries, they increased by only 40%. Which means there is a 60% gap between 10 years ago and now when you pay rent. And this is a huge number because it shows that rents have far outpaced earnings, leaving renters with much less disposable income for food, bills, transport, or savings. This gap has caused millions of renters to struggle financially, pushed many families into poverty, and made it extremely difficult for young people to save for a deposit or move out. Essentially, even though salaries went up, the cost of housing has risen faster than people's ability to pay, creating a housing affordability crisis across the UK. And this crisis doesn't just exist in statistics, it reshapes people's entire life paths. When housing becomes unstable, everything else becomes unstable too. Young professionals who should be building careers are instead calculating how many flatmates they need to afford next month's rent. Couples delay marriage. Families delay having children. Some people even turn down better job opportunities simply because moving would mean entering an even more expensive rental market. Housing is supposed to provide stability, but for millions, it has become the biggest source of uncertainty in their lives. When you don't know if you'll still be in your home next year, long-term planning becomes almost impossible. In major cities, especially London, the pressure reaches another level entirely. Rental listings disappear within days, sometimes hours, and tenants are forced into bidding wars just to secure a basic property. Recent market reports show that in many areas there are around 10 or more applicants competing for a single rental home. That kind of imbalance completely shifts the power dynamic. Landlords can increase prices, tighten conditions, or refuse negotiations because they know someone else is waiting. And when competition is that intense, tenants often feel pressured to accept higher rents or poorer conditions just to avoid becoming homeless. The psychological toll of this situation is rarely discussed, but it's very real. Living paycheck to paycheck while spending nearly half your income on rent creates constant background stress. It affects mental health, productivity, and overall quality of life. Studies have shown that financial insecurity is strongly linked to anxiety and depression. And when housing, the most basic human need, becomes unstable, that stress multiplies. It's not just about money, it's about dignity, security, and the ability to feel settled. A home should be a safe space. For many renters, it feels temporary and fragile. At the same time, the long-term financial consequences are devastating. If nearly 45% of income goes to rent, saving for a deposit becomes extremely difficult. Let's say someone earns an average salary and manages to save 5 to 10% of their income per year. At that pace, building a deposit could take a decade or more, especially as property prices continue rising during that time. Meanwhile, homeowners benefit from capital appreciation. Over the last decade, property values in many parts of the UK have increased significantly, meaning owners build wealth while renters transfer a large portion of their income to landlords without gaining any assets in return. That wealth gap compounds year after year. Beyond the visible rent increases, there's a quieter statistical pattern forming underneath the surface, one that speaks to long-term structural stress rather than short-term volatility. First, rental inflation has consistently outpaced wage growth in key UK regions over the past decade. In several urban centres, private rents have risen at more than double the rate of median income growth. That gap compounds annually. Even a 3 to 4% yearly difference, sustained over 10 years, creates a structural affordability divide that becomes mathematically difficult to reverse. When housing costs grow faster than productivity, the system slowly reallocates income away from consumption and savings toward fixed shelter costs. That's not cyclical pressure, that's redistribution. Second, eviction-related court cases have surged back to, and in some areas exceeded, pre-pandemic levels. But the important detail isn't just the volume, it's the acceleration rate. The backlog in housing courts has grown significantly, meaning more households are trapped in uncertainty for longer periods. Housing instability increases mental health strain, job instability, and school disruption for children. The economic cost of instability isn't fully captured in GDP numbers, but its downstream effects show up in productivity loss and public service strain. Third, there's the housing benefit gap. In many regions, local housing allowance rates no longer cover the median market rent. That means even households receiving state support must bridge the difference themselves. When benefits lag behind market reality, it effectively transfers market risk onto low-income tenants. This pushes more households into arrears, increases reliance on food banks, and raises the long-term fiscal burden on local authorities. Another under-discussed statistic is the decline in home ownership rates among under 40s compared to previous generations at the same age. While older cohorts accumulated property during periods of lower price-to-income ratios, younger workers now face ratios that in some regions exceed 8 to 10 times annual earnings. That fundamentally changes wealth trajectories. Property ownership historically functioned as the primary wealth-building vehicle in the UK.